everybody. Welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 115. We made it. It's a rainy Monday in the Hudson Valley. Coming to you on a joyful day, right? Little rain doesn't hurt anybody. I want to thank everybody who came out and had kind words from me at the Sexy Liberal Tour in Town Hall, New York City, last Saturday night. It was a lot of fun. It was great meeting you guys. I never really get to meet anybody. You know, I do this podcast, as I said, and it goes out there and you see some numbers on a screen, and some kind comments, which I always appreciate, but there's no comparison with like looking in somebody's eyes and smiling and getting to to meet them. So appreciate all you guys, appreciate all the support on the Substack. I wrote a couple of them last week, and they've done pretty well in terms of responses. So check that out if you're not following Noel's notes on Substack. And thanks for indulging me in the music again. Hooked up my keyboard. You're in trouble. Self-accompaniment. Alright, I'm going to shut up or I'm going to end up playing music the whole time. Let's get into it. You know, these rainy summer days, they remind me, like I lived with my dad one summer up in Woodstock, and my mom drove me up there. Must have been around 1977, maybe 78. I was a pretty little kid, and she was like, "You're gonna go spend the summer with your dad," and we drove up there and followed the directions that he gave us long before GPS or any kind of email, you know, and they led to a road called Mink Hollow Road, which is a dead end. And we got to the end of it, and the direction said, "Follow this path down to a stream." And we followed the path down to a stream and came to a tent. And my dad was living in a tent, and that's where I spent the summer. And it was Todd Rundgren's old place on Mink Hollow Road, which was pretty cool, but when it rained, I'd have to sit in a tent all day and occupy myself and, you know, help develop my imagination and stuff. And on sunny days, I'd swim in the stream, the Sawkill, if anybody knows the area. And we lived on brown rice and mung beans that we cooked over a fire. So I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're a hippie kid, you know the deal. But, you know, when you have those experiences as a kid, it helps you rely on your imagination, music, and creativity. And Woodstock was thriving in that time. I mean, you're talking less than 10 years after the concert. So there was all kinds of freaks and hippies around. And it was also that part of the 70s where there was like what I call the batik hippies. You know, there was the wavy gravy kind of element, you know. The hog farm kind of vibe had come from the West Coast. They obviously kind of saved the day at Woodstock. That's where granola came from. Most people don't realize that, but they mixed up granola because they knew it would keep the people alive and it was easy to eat. So they handed out like paper cups of granola to feed all these kids that showed up for the concert and didn't really bring any provisions. So you can thank old Wavy for that. I got to meet Wavy a bunch. I used to do his birthday party, which was a benefit for Camp Win a Rainbow. Win a Rainbow, it's Northern California. And takes kids from the city and gets them out of town for the summer. Gets them out in nature, which is always a good thing. So I'm on a tangent there, but my point is I remember that part of the 70s, and, you know, everybody thinks about the rock and roll and the music and the drugs and all that crap, but there was also a lot of good people. Not that that stuff is crap. Some of the drugs are crap, but, you know, there was a lot of good people who wanted to make the world a better place, and that's where the environmental movement came out of. You know, the modern environmental movement came out of the 70s, basically. Earth Day, early 70s, and that idea of helping one another, and that idea of celebrating life through music and through art and through coming together. That's a valuable thing. And we've lost sight of that to some extent during this Trump era, as I talk about every week, because progress has been taken from us because there's such a distraction with this freak and his desire for attention and the narcissism that is sort of dovetailed with this, burgeoning Christo-fascist movement. And it's robbing children of a lot of the nurturing that a society can give you. And that's what we're going to get back to, right? That's what VP Harris and most especially Tim Walz, who's now is the nominee. That's new since we spoke last time. That's good news and something to celebrate, because that's a joyful dude. That dude's the real deal. He understands that, helping people is the true measure of a man, and he's the perfect antidote to the sort of toxic masculinity that's been foisted upon us, starting with kind of 9/11, and it sort of calcified during the Trump era, and now it's just this bullshit that I talk about all the time. So instead, you got a real guy. This guy, he was in the National Guard, he's done service, he goes hunting, he has guns, he knows how to do a hard day's work, but he's not an asshole. He's willing to change. His daughter got him to change his position. He was a lifetime member of the NRA who had a perfect rating, and she, said, no, we got to do something about this. His school shootings are out of hand. And he changed his mind and evolved and didn't care about the political consequences. And it made him wildly popular in his home state on both sides of the aisle. And that's a positive development, and you can feel it. There's an organic, joyful enthusiasm, which we didn't have before. And go with that. Don't get distracted. The last podcast I did was Trump was trying to steal the narrative back again, because he did the National, Association of Black Journalists, and everybody went for it. Everybody talked about it. And the reason I'm back here today is because he's going to be on X tonight with Elon Musk, and everyone's going to talk about that. You don't have to. It hasn't happened yet, but my hunch is mainstream media is going to breathlessly report on it. And that's not doing anybody any favors. We don't need to go back to this. He's desperate for attention. The news cycle all weekend was about his, tweet about the fake crowds at Kamala Harris's rally and how it was AI'd. It wasn't AI'd, it was real. It was a real picture, but he couldn't stand it because he craves attention, and he surrounds himself with so many sycophants that my hunch is somebody there was like, oh, it's not even real, boss. I AI'd that, So that's what he tweeted, which is ridiculous and stupid, and we don't have to take the bait. We don't have to talk about it, So, and Elon Musk is obviously a horrible human being who's a fascist who, since we last spoke, basically incited race riots in the UK. And now he's defending the rioters, just like Trump defends the J6 people. Enough with these men. These aren't even crafty villains. These are just dumb, boring, immature men who inherited wealth, who took other people's ideas and proclaimed themselves geniuses and leaders, and they're fucking morons, pardon my French, but just move on for it. Grab onto what we have now. Grab onto hope. Grab onto joy. Grab onto this ticket and be inspired by the organic, genuine enthusiasm that's taken place. I haven't seen anything like it. And I love President Biden, and I love the policies, and I support him, and I'm not a fan of the backroom wrangling that pushed him out, and I was very wary of the idea of a contested convention. Thankfully, we got a gift, and all that is behind us. We have a solid ticket that everybody can get behind, and you should, because he's going to try to, say it was stolen, and they got all these tricks up their sleeves, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But right now, make the noise so loud, so deafeningly, full of joy and laughter that they can't deny it. Because that's what he's trying to deny. And he's trying to pull back the narrative and get everybody to pay attention to it. And the media's going to do that, right? Because Trump pays the bills, right? Progress and positivity doesn't sell in the way that Trump and outrage sells. And the media knows that, right? That's why they covered his press conference last week. And I sort of went off on Twitter, which I plan on not using, by the way. So if you follow me there, look for me somewhere else, Substack or Threads or something, because I don't want to go back. And, he did that press conference, which wasn't a press conference. He sat up there for 90 minutes and lied. I think NPR collected all the lies, and there was 100, gazillion lies. I don't know the actual number, but a staggering amount that added up to he lied like twice a minute for 90 minutes or, however long he was up there. And the entire media covered it. MSNBC carried it live. They got throttled by Lawrence O'Donnell. Good on him. He said, this isn't journalism. They're falling for it. And you know why? Because the guys who own those networks are the same guys playing golf out in Atlantic, with the Trump guys, They had a big fundraiser in Bridgehampton last week, with Howard Lutnick held the fundraiser. If you don't know who Howard Lutnick is, he was the owner of Cantor Fitzgerald. They lost 700 employees on 9/11. He's a real kind of sketchy dude. He bought a townhouse right next to Jeffrey Epstein. His brother brokered that deal. He had a fundraiser in May of 2019 where he called in Steve Wynn and Giuliani and Trump himself and all these guys, these billionaires, and were like, pony up, right? Support Don's next campaign or the shit that happened next door might come out, right? Because all these guys knew what they were doing in Jeffrey Epstein's house, okay? They had another fundraiser there in May. Now he has yet another fundraiser at his mansion out in Bridgehampton last weekend. The scum of the earth, a lot of these guys are. These guys know who Trump is, and they don't care. All these other builders in New York City, Richie LaFrac, all these guys, they've known who Trump is for decades, but they want tax cuts. They want to, maintain control. And I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but nothing adds up about anything these guys are involved in. Even 9/11 is there's a reason there was a lot of Saudi Arabians involved, and there could have been a message being sent to guys who were losing Saudi Arabian money, most specifically Howard Lutnick and Cantor Fitzgerald, if you know what I'm saying. And that kind of stuff, the stuff that happens in the shadows, the stuff that Bill Barr covers up and you don't find out about, right? Epstein dying in prison, Bill Barr taking care of the whole situation, wiping off his greasy little hands, nobody knowing what was in the safes in Epstein's townhouse. They didn't raid his island until after he was dead. None of that adds up. And who was in charge of that? Bill Barr. He was in charge of the FBI. He was the attorney general at the time. So there's a lot of unanswered things that they never want you to know. And that's why they're so desperate to get Trump back in power. And that's why these billionaires are ponying up for him. So be wary. There's a thing on Twitter today. Somebody took a picture, good for them, of a smaller jet that Trump used on Saturday because his main plane couldn't land in Billings. I don't know if you followed that, but his main plane couldn't land in Billings, Montana at his rally last week because he owed the airport money for fuel. So when the pilot said request permission to land, they were like, no, you land and, you better cut us a check. So he landed somewhere else and took a car. So he's using a smaller jet on Saturday. Someone took a picture of it, ran the tail number, and the serial number matched up to Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, right? It's the same fucking plane. So they took Epstein's plane after they offed him, and now it says Trump 2024 on it, right? The spoils of war, they confiscate stuff. And if you don't know how deep it went with Jeffrey Epstein, he collected compromise and he provided underage girls for billionaires. The Koch brothers lived down the street, East 71st Street. You go on the other side of Madison, that's 740 Park Avenue. The side door is on Madison. You could walk down the street, go into Epstein's clubhouse, because that's basically what it was, a clubhouse for billionaires who wanted to sleep with teenagers. Sleep is a nice word for sexual assault and rape, because that's what they did. That's what Donald Trump did. They did it to a friend of mine who ended up there. A friend of mine, by the way, I told this last week, or last time I was on here. She got groomed by Trump when she was 12, taking figure skating lessons at his ice rink. She called him her dirty uncle, and she made some bad choices after that kind of trauma and ended up in Epstein's house. And she said, Noel, you wouldn't believe what these men did to women and girls in that place. That's what they did. It was a clubhouse for sick perverts. And it's not just Trump who was in there, A lot of guys went there, including Elon Musk, right? That's why Elon Musk is hosting and promoting Donald Trump, because they want to rule the world and they want to hide their secrets. and it's disgusting, and he should be in jail for it. But he's a wealthy white man, and there's a lot of other wealthy white men that are behind this kind of stuff and perpetuating this insanity. No sober, sane businessman wants to hand the reins to Donald Trump. So somebody like Howard Lutnick is a bad actor. You know, he's supporting bad actors. That's what happens here. You know, they retain power. Prince Andrew, all these scumbags, you know, this international global criminal cartel. Half of London exists because they're laundering money for Vladimir Putin. You know, international money laundering, which was the other thing that Trump was majorly involved in, as was Epstein, you know, and they use the illicit sort of vice side of it to collect compromise on the people who they get entangled with. And then it just becomes this whole messy thing. And there becomes like a cabal behind the scenes, a web of deceit and treachery and abuse. And the men in power control this, and they don't get held accountable, and they manipulate the rank and file, you know, the working class sort of mediocre white dudes in the suburb, and they throw them a bone and a flag and a little bit of racism, and they're like, vote for us, we're the real patriots. You know, they're not. Mike Flynn is not a patriot. He's a bad actor who was on both Putin and Turkey's payroll and doing all kinds of scummy things, and he still is. There's a reason he got pardoned, you know. Ditto Paul Manafort, ditto Roger Stone. The list goes on and on. So you have to think about this. You have to I know it's too much to almost take in at once. I have a series called Black Books that I write on Substack, and I sort of break this down in a fictional way, like the faux literature kind of comedic way that I write. But what I'm talking about is real, and I'm trying to sort of fill in the narrative for you, because it's a lot to keep in your brain. You know, and you can't trust the media to report on any of this stuff, because they're not interested in reporting it. They're interested in getting a house out in Sag Harbor and keeping their jobs, you know, so they don't dig deep when they write about a fundraiser in Bridgehampton, you know. And it may seem curious to you that the Sunday Times yesterday, New York Times, did a feature on Kid Rock and Barry Weiss, right? Why are these people of interest to the New York Times readers? They're not. What they're of interest is to the people who own the media companies trying to normalize Trump's racism. There's nothing normal about any of this. There's nothing normal about the last 8 years. As I said last time, this is trauma. We've gone through trauma. And it's not just a U.S. problem. It's a global problem. The U.K. saw that last week, and they've been learning that lesson since Brexit. Same thing in the Mideast. You know, Putin's got his hand in all of this stuff. Iran is a proxy of Putin. You know, it's all connected, and it's all bad news. And you don't get many opportunities to vote away that kind of stuff. Usually, you know, that kind of stuff ends in war and a lot of people dying. And we're already losing a lot of people. Obviously, there's war all over the world. And think about Ukraine, right? Think about how the GOP, the right wing, J.D. Vance himself said, what do I care about Ukraine, right? What do I care about them? You should care, because it's democracy, right? Because that's our enemy attacking them. But Putin is not an enemy to the GOP, you know? He's an ally. And he is an ally to Trump. And that's why Trump is always singing the praises of men like Putin and men like Xi and men like Kim Jong-un. You know, he's pretending to be a tough guy. He's not a tough guy. He's an employee of autocracy. And he's hoping he can take over the U.S. and set up a kleptocracy here, right, and be in charge of it. And he and his family will profit. And behind the scenes, you got smart, wily guys like Jared. You know, I don't intelligent is not a word I would ascribe to Jared, but he's clever. He's smarter than Trump. That's why you don't see Vanki and Jared anymore. They're hiding in the shadows. They got $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. You know, Saudi Arabia is at the root of a lot of this, right? Saudi Arabia propped up El-Sisi in Egypt, who murdered his own people to put down the Arab Spring, which by happenstance was sort of, spread on Facebook, right? And there was no policing there when the danger that was going to befall these people, Zuckerberg did not get involved, right? The Russians manipulated Facebook during the 2016 elections. When rumors spread online, these tech giants don't jump in and make it better. That's what Elon Musk did in these UK riots. They started because of a lie, saying an immigrant had stabbed these kids. The dude was born in Cardiff, or somewhere like that. It wasn't, but they'll put this lie out and all of a sudden these riots start. The Arab Spring was different. Ostensibly, it was a peaceful uprising, right? But they had to tamp it down, and El-Sisi had the backing of Saudi Arabia, and he murdered his own people. By the way, 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, I did a big car rant on this. I don't know if you saw it, but El-Sisi gave Trump $10 million in cash. They put it in 2 bags, from a bank near an airport in Egypt, weighed 200 pounds, $10 million in cash, flew it over and gave it to Trump because he was out of money to buy commercials in the final weeks of his campaign. And even though he said he would contribute his own money, he never did. He's cheap as fuck. He's not going to spend his own money. He doesn't have that much money. He has the illusion of wealth. He has his name on buildings. He doesn't have that many assets because he doesn't know how to run a business. He knows how to grift and steal, right? So he needed cash. El-Sisi, Egypt, came through a dictatorship, an autocracy. An authoritarian gave him a $10 million cash loan, right? He bought some more commercials. He won the election, sort of, with the help of Russia and the major, help of mainstream media, who was too fixated on, Hillary Clinton's emails to write about a guy who was a sexual predator for decades in New York City, and they looked the other way. Dude had his daughter giving him lap dances in public, and nobody thought to write an article about it, right? So they went after Hillary, whatever. He gets $10 million from Egypt. Then while he's president, he releases all these funds that were being held by Obama because he murdered his own people. So they're like, hey, we're going to seize this stuff. We're not going to, your assets here in the United States, we're holding on to because you're violating international law. Trump released all those funds. So Egypt got $100 million, hundreds of $1 million, I can't even talk today, back, right? Quid pro quo. That's why American politicians are not allowed to accept cash from international sources, right? Because you don't want outside actors to curry favor with an American president because they're going to set policy based on that. And that is essentially all Trump did for his entire 4 years in office. The first trip he took was to Saudi Arabia, where he did the orb dance and had the sword in his hand and all this bullshit. And they knew how to work him. As soon as he pulled into town, they had his poster on the wall, his face hanging off of the side of buildings. Welcome, President Trump. And he loved it. He sucked it up because he's emotionally about as mature as a 14-year-old, and this is a messed up 14-year-old, right? Because there's a lot of sober, mature 14-year-olds. Trump's not, right? If you're in recovery, you stop basically maturing emotionally at the time you start using, right? My friends in recovery understand that that concept, right? So that's how Trump is. He's been using women, he's been using drugs, he's been using money, he's been using all of these things his whole life to cover up his own defects, right? His own, learning disabilities because he can't read and he was too embarrassed to do anything about it. That's how the Trump clan is. They don't tell you if there's a problem. They just pretend like it doesn't exist, because they see it as a weakness. There's never a weakness in getting help for anything that happens. That's strength, actually. Strength is admitting you have a problem and doing something about it. Denying it is weakness. Denying it is delusion. And Trump is, the poster child for that. So he's got the emotional maturity of a 14-year-old. What you're seeing now, what you've seen then, what you saw in the 1980s when he was calling up Page Six and telling them that, like Marla said, or early 90s, he was the best sex I ever had. Like, how immature a human being are you to do stuff like that? That's who Trump is. That's what you don't want as a president. That's what we had the opposite in Biden, and that's why Trump and the Republicans attacked Biden so much, because he was such a decent, honorable man that he offended them. They don't know what righteousness looks like, and the sight of it makes them recoil inside, right? Biden stepped aside for the good of democracy to make a stronger ticket to beat him, and that offended them because they thought they were going to be able to beat him, and the media was going along with it, and the media was down on Biden, and Now you can sense the media trying to take the narrative back and give Trump oxygen again. You don't feed a fire, right? You smother it. And that's what you need to do with this stuff, because it is a fire, and it's preventing us from dealing with the actual problems in the world. Climate change. It's raining again. It rained for a week. We had a freaking hurricane practically here a couple days ago. None of that stuff has been talked about to the extent it should be during the Trump era. Now you got Tim Walz, who's a leader in the environment in Minnesota. You got VP Harris, who's going to continue the policies of the Biden administration, which, infrastructure bill, IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, all of these things had wonderful climate provisions in them, and we can do so much more. We have to do so much more, but we can't even really begin to fully have that conversation with the threat of fascism at our door, with the wolf at our door, so to speak. So that's another benefit, another reason to vote blue, to get back to business, to get back to caring for one another. The universal free lunch program that Walz put in while he was in Minnesota. That's a wonderful thing, right? Feeding children so they can learn, and giving it to everybody so some kids don't get picked on that your parents are poor because you got free lunch. I grew up in the era where all of that stuff happened, and it was fucking painful. It made it almost impossible to learn. And I saw my friends go hungry when Reagan came in and cut the free lunch program. He cut my neighborhood. We would go into school early and you would get free breakfast. They'd bus us into a leafier, wealthier suburb, and you'd sit down and get some French toast breakfast. And my friends relied on it, and I saw it got taken away. I saw them go hungry in the morning. Heartbreaking stuff. Cruelty. Cruelty is behind a lot of the Republican policies because they want people poor and uneducated. They want sort of serfs that they can rule over, and then they want to divide the working class. They want to divide the people who have the least amount and get them to hate each other and fight against each other so they don't see who's really ripping them off. And that's the oldest con in capitalism right there. That's the kernel of the whole thing that the industrialists came up with. Make the indentured servants, resent the enslaved people who are now newly freed, right? That they're your problem. And that's what Trump's doing, right? The immigrants are taking your jobs. The immigrants aren't taking your jobs. The immigrants will strengthen this country. Giving everybody a fair shot strengthens the United States. Diversity strengthens the United States. And we need all hands on deck. We need everybody to live up to their full potential right now, because we need the brilliance and genius that is in every human body and heart. We're all the same. We're all one. Everybody has the potential for greatness. And I don't mean greatness like we see at the Olympics or something. Those are obviously, some people stand up higher than others, but those people are meant to inspire us. All the great heroes sort of come from behind and represent a people. And then they provide empathy and understanding and acceptance so people stop wasting their time being racist against somebody because they're black or brown or Asian or gay, or transgender, or different from what you've been told is the standard. There is no standard. There's the human standard, and that's it, And true heroes, promote that and recognize it. The Olympics just ended last night, and there's always inspiring stories that come out of that, One of my favorite Olympic stories is, Duke Kahanamoku. Do you know who Duke Kahanamoku is? He was thought of as he's the king of surfing, right? He's the godfather of surfing. He was the Hawaiian who would be on these wooden long boards and basically taught everybody to surf. He went to Australia and showed them how to ride waves sideways and developed the sport of surfing. But he came to world fame as a swimmer, as an Olympic swimmer. And what happened was he was there in Hawaii, a big, tall, good-looking guy. Beautiful smile, tan, the guy looks like a god, just a, Adonis of a man, right? And some people went to Hawaii and they saw this guy swim and they're like, oh my God, like the International Swimming Committee went to Hawaii. They saw this guy swim and he beat the world record by 4 seconds the first time he got into water. He never competed anymore. It was natural to him. The flutter kick that Michael Phelps and all these Olympians use, that's from Duke. Duke is the guy who developed that. It came natural to him. There was no training, right? So these, U.S. Swimming Association discovered this guy in Hawaii. They brought him to the mainland, to Pittsburgh, trained him how to swim and compete, and he went into the Olympics. This is like before World War I, 1910 or so, 14. I don't have the years. Whatever year that first Olympics was, this guy shows up to represent America. And he's brown, right? We're in a segregated time, and this guy's a Pacific Islander. So some people are like, this guy can't compete with us, because the Olympics primarily at that point was the U.S. and Europe. Asia wasn't that represented. Africa certainly wasn't well represented. Indigenous people were not represented. It was a sort of white Anglo-Saxon club. And here comes this big brown guy who's taller and, more powerful a swimmer than any of these other guys. And they did some behind the scenes stuff and disqualified him from the 100-meter, I think it was, before he got a chance to medal, to race. Somebody was like, nah, we're going to disqualify him. He didn't show up for his heat. Like they didn't tell him the right time to show up in the morning and then use that to kick him out. And an Australian guy named Cecil Healy, right, who was the top swimmer basically in the world at that point. And he was an Australian, and he found out what they were doing. And he said no. And this guy would have won the gold medal with Duke not in the race. And he said, no, I don't want to win the gold medal by cheating. I want to race the best in the world. Put him in the race. And he launched a complaint as an athlete, and it went through. And they put Duke in the race, and Duke kicked his ass, and won the gold medal. And this guy got a silver medal, and he did the right thing, and that made him a true champion, right? Because that's what a real champion does. He sees the good of all humanity and says, no, I don't want to cheat. I don't want to be, the gold medalist if it's not real. It's the antithesis of Trump and the GOP, right? That's what this guy does. And Duke becomes a hero around the whole world. And Duke and Cecil become friends. And Cecil's the one who invites Duke to Australia, which obviously has a long history of their own colonialism and racism and indigenous people. You know that story. There's some Australians who listen to this show, right? And Cecil brings him there knowing it'll help his own people to see this guy, who is a Pacific Islander, who is a sort of indigenous in terms of, the Anglo population there. And he teaches them all to surf and wows the country. Freshwater Beach, it happened. And half the country shows up to see this guy surf. And they thought he was going to come in straight on a wave like they had been doing. They would surf the whitewater because there was minor surfing, but not modern surfing, right? There was getting in the whitewater and just going straight in. This guy doesn't have a board. He carves a board out of a tree, right, in the age-old way that they did in Hawaii, where they become sort of one with the board and the tree, and they shape the board out of the grain of the tree. It's a spiritual thing. They're becoming one with the water, one with nature, one with the tree. They're grounded in this. It's a spiritual practice as much as it's a sport, right? The guy builds a thing, builds a board, gets in the water, and they, surfs the green part of the wave, surfs the water, not the foam, not the breaking part, and goes sideways and is catching barrels and standing on his head. He was a showman. He's walking up and down the board. He grabs a woman there on the beach and puts her on his shoulders and surfs with her on his shoulders. Miraculous, mind-blowing, awe-inspiring stuff that people cheer for. And it launches not only the modern surfing industry, it moves humanity forward, right? And it's not just the great Duke, Kahanamoku who does this. It's this Cecil guy, this Healy guy, this Australian who could have gone with the way it was supposed to be, the sort of white superior attitude and won his gold medal and gone home a champion. And instead he went beyond that. He expanded us all. And that guy, by the way, had to go fight in World War I, and he died in World War I. He was a lieutenant, and he launched a battle where they swam across the river, to go the Somme River to attack the Germans, right? And he had an elite, troop of swimmers that fought in World War I. Somebody needs to make a movie about that. That's an amazing story. But that's how history has moved forward. My point is, the greatest champions and the greatest, artists and stuff, Louis Armstrong, they're people that faced this diversity of the way things were, and they had a gift, and they expressed that gift through love despite the circumstances, right? Louis Armstrong was going around this country making some of the, inventing jazz, essentially, this modern only jazz came out of America. You could make an argument it's the only pure American, musical idiom. Everything else you can sort of trace back to Europe in a way. Jazz is different. It came out of the gumbo in New Orleans. You had African rhythms. In essence, you had sort of chord progressions that were European and stuff in a traditional song cycle. But what it did when it was blown through the lips of Louis Armstrong was something nobody had ever heard. And it's a beautiful thing that, we've exported all around the world. This guy's going around the world doing this, lighting the world on fire with music and having to walk through the back door of a nightclub to play the music. And he was not alone in that. All of his, compatriots were treated the same way. You're treating Duke Ellington that way. These geniuses that are on par with all the great, Western composers in the canon, right? So it's somebody who faces adversity and knows that he's tapped into something so great in his own soul that he has to share it with the world. That's how the world changes. People who have a light and a fire inside them and they go out and do it. And you can never do that alone. That's my point about Cecil Healy. There's all these people, if you look closely at history, that show up and say, no, that ain't right. Let's change this. Let's work together. Black and white, let's work together. Because we're all a human family, and we're all here for a limited amount of time to learn and love each other. And that's what the bad actors don't want. They want to divide you. They want to, they want Democrats to hate Republicans and Republicans to hate Democrats, and liberals are bad, that's all BS. That's all bullshit, So you have to learn, you're always meeting yourself, right? And the more you can tap into those frequencies of love and kindness, the better off you are, right? And we're coming through a period politically where, it's just been disgusting. It's soul crushing. And you cannot allow the people who are profiting off it to continue to do it. I just hit the synthesizer. It's too tempting to continue to do that. All right. You can't let them do that. Don't let media manipulate you. If like I talked about last week, if you find yourself feeling toxic being online, get off, go outside, look at a flower, read a book. I went into the city last week and I saw Amma, and I've talked about Amma before. I got this ring. That's why I'm wearing an Amma ring. But Amma's the hugging saint from India, and she's got all these charities in India. She builds schools and educates women. And feeds the underprivileged. And she does this all over the world. It's not specific to India. She's from Kerala, South India. If you're hip to it, you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like yoga stuff, Hindu path of devotion. But you don't have to be a member of that religion to show up and get the vibe in the room. And 10,000 New Yorkers come every time she's here. And she hasn't been here since the pandemic, since 2019. So I hadn't seen her in years. And I get in the room, and instantly I can feel the vibe. And my plan was just I was going to go in for a few hours and meditate. And you have to get a token to get, it's called darshan. And she gives you the hug. And it feels like, 1,000 grandmothers are giving you a hug. And she whispers in your ear and says something. It's a mantra, and I don't know what it is, but you can feel it on a soul level if you're hip to that sort of thing, right? So I was there. I was just going to meditate. And then I ended up, whenever I go there, I'd stay all day. And she hugs day and night. So you can get a hug at 3 a.m. For 3 days, she's basically sitting there, hugging people with her, her helpers and the people that are on the stage. But she's just sitting there. She doesn't get up and take a bathroom break or anything. She's just hugging people for 12, 14 hours. So I was like, I've gotten a lot of hugs in the past. I'll just meditate and leave. And then I ended up being there later than I thought. It was 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I was going to leave. And then I was like, I was kind of getting mad that I didn't get a hug, right? I was like, damn, I've been here all day and I didn't get a token when I got here. I'm such a dumbass, I'm screwing myself out of this hug, oh well. And I get up to leave, and it'd been a beautiful sunny day. And it was at the Javits Center, all those glass walls. So when I go to leave, it's dark out and pouring rain. So I was like, guess I'm not leaving now, And I turn around, and there was these ladies that were handing out the tokens for the darshan. So I took a token. Wasn't that long I had to wait, and I got this hug. And I remembered, like, oh, I used to be all into this spiritual stuff. I was going to yoga every day. I was feeling good. I was doing my art and everything. And I sort of got sidetracked with all this Trump stuff. And I'm not saying it's not important to do that stuff, but, it gets toxic at a certain point to focus on that too much. So it was a reminder, like, there's a big, beautiful world out there. And if we focus attention on just the bad things and on somebody like Donald Trump, we're cheating ourselves from that, out of the goodness, right? And this thing I did, like the Stephanie Miller Sexy Liberal thing, this was at Town Hall. It was like sold out, and everybody there was a good vibe feeling people. People were happy. We got Kamala Harris. You got Tim Walz now. This was right before Tim Walz was announced, but the vibe was already like, we're going to win this. We can do this. We can come out of the darkness into the light. And that's what we're moving into now. And if you're hip to it, you can feel it, and I can feel it. So you need to take that inspiration. Like I said last week, you got less than 90 days now. One day at a time. Talk to a neighbor, talk to a friend, explain the issues. Everybody's good now, and they should be at explaining all the darkness of Project 2025 and what they want. But think of what we can get. Think of what we can achieve if we work together, if we come together as one. That's what we need to do. That was my point in the Duke story, the surfing story. Is like, there's more of that ahead of us, right? There's people we haven't seen who are going to show us a new way, right? And a lot of those people aren't what you would traditionally think of as the white Americans that the Republicans are constantly saying are under attack and the immigrants are a threat to. No, they're not. I guarantee you there's some kid out there that we haven't met yet that's coming from another country that's going to come to this land and write a book that's going to change things or discover something in medicine or science, and we need that. We need all of the gifts that humanity can offer to change the direction we're in, because this is caused by industry. The oil and gas industry is heating up the planet, and nobody wants to do anything about it. That's a generalization. A lot of people are working overtime, and the client scientists are ripping their hair out because nobody's listening. And what is the press talking about? Donald Trump, because it gets eyeballs and clicks. And what are the PACs talking about a lot of the time? Donald Trump, because it makes you money. You're not going to make money on a planet that's toasted, right? And some people are willing to keep burning it up to keep their profit streams coming in, and that's wrong. And you've battled that kind of stuff all throughout history, right? But the Napoleonic Wars or something are a lot different than what we're facing now, because now the mechanization of this stuff is planet destroying. Before you'd have people destroyed, and you'd have empires because they'd go and attack a people and steal their resources. But the resources were emeralds, in the case, like, or something, some kind of natural resource. They'd take over part of Central America because they want to, they want all the bananas or something, right? As I talked about Banana Republic, you can have myriad examples of that. South Africa, diamond mines, There's all kinds of example of empires and colonialism robbing natural resources, right? But all those other cases, they mess up the country and they dig mines, but they don't destroy the planet. The problem now is that oil and gas, it's over. Like, that party is done, and we have to wake up to that. And we can't let the bad guys who are behind that, and the nation states that are behind that, the Saudi Arabia, the Putins, we can't let them continue to destroy this planet, and we can't let them manipulate the venal politicians in our country who are willing to do that so they can enrich themselves and their families. And that's what Trump is. That's what J.D. Vance is. This sycophant guy who doesn't have any real morality. I told you I watched a show of him the night that Biden stepped down. It was on I don't even want to talk about this fucking idiot, but it was on like C-SPAN, and it was a book tour from 2017, I believe, when his book came out. And he was just like a different person. He wasn't like a cool liberal, but he was like not the same venom-spitting guy you see now. He was somebody who was sort of bemused that he had a bestseller because he had no interest in writing and no interest in writing another book. He didn't have a message or any kind of particular insight. He just sort of scammed his way and bullshitted his way through a book because a Yale professor said you should write about this kind of stuff. And, the liberal media went salivated over it. Oh, here's insight into Appalachia. The guy was from Dayton or something. You know what I mean? He wasn't living in some holler, whatever you call it. He wasn't up in the woods. People who actually grow up that way turn into wonderful people, many of them. Dolly Parton is from poverty, and Dolly Parton gives money away to help people. I've met Dolly Parton. She's the real deal. Most of the people that have suffered and gained, some level of notoriety or wealth in life, the good ones give back because they understand how lucky they are and how so many people just like them will never get the opportunity to be lucky. And that stuff will have an impact on your life. That's a lot of what I witnessed. I knew I was going to get out of the circumstance I was in. Both of my grandfathers went to Ivy League schools. My mom had me at 19, and she was a bit of, she had her own trauma, and she had alcoholism and addiction. So and this was the 70s. So she was a bit of like overlooked black sheep, and we ended up in some tough circumstances, but I knew we would get out of them by no other reason than my extended family was already at such a level, and my skin was white, that I wasn't going to fall prey as much as my friends and neighbors were to like Republican Party and corrupt law enforcement and all this kind of stuff that attacks and punishes a people because of the color of their skin. I wasn't going to be a victim of systematic racism, but my friends were. And a lot of my friends didn't make it out of that situation, And I speak as much for myself today as I do for them, for the guys who didn't get a platform and didn't get a chance to make this world better. And that's what the best of humanity does, Again, back to Duke, Kahanamoku. He was riding those waves for a people. He wasn't cashing in for himself. He was doing it because he saw humanity as one family. And all your best spiritual leaders do that. Dr. Martin Luther King, right? He wasn't like, we're going to get ours and we're going to fuck you over. Pardon my cursing. He was like, we're all going to live together. We're all going to have these opportunities. We're not going to hold vengeance in our heart for how you've treated my people for 300 years, where you could easily make that case, right? He spoke with love. Gandhi spoke with love, right? To his oppressors. Hey, we just want a fair shot. We just want the same things you guys want. That's the message of love and humanity that we have to carry forth. And that should be central to your political party. If your political aims are excluding another person, you're not in a party. You're participating in a resentment. You're participating in the same kind of ignorance and darkness that has brought suffering throughout history. And you don't need to do that, And now we have a chance to not do that. We are in one of those rare times. Our generation and the generations that encompass this moment have an opportunity to change the direction of this country for the better, for the foreseeable future. And we have to do it. We owe it to people we haven't even met yet. We owe it to kids and birds and animals that haven't been born yet. Last week, there's been a turkey in my backyard, and it's got 4 baby turkeys. And the mother's walking around every morning through the yard, staying close to her little baby turkeys, and they're eating in the grass. And sometimes they'll sit down in the grass, and all you can see is their little heads. They like disappear, and the mom looks around, And you can see the love and the pride in that animal, trying to protect her creatures in this world where there's jacked up pickup trucks going by on the road and lawnmowers and all this kind of stuff that to nature must be like, what are these people doing? This is insane. You're in this beautiful situation, and these gas-powered monsters are running around everywhere, chewing up the earth, spitting smoke and fuel and poison into the air. Animals don't do that. You know, we do that to them, and we can't keep doing that to them and to ourselves, right? We got to get sane again. You know, I'm not saying shut down everything overnight, but we got to find a better way. But observe nature. That's my point. I'm watching this turkey. I was out there this morning, just sitting there watching it. You know, I watched some deer come by, and they like kind of startled the turkey, but they didn't attack each other. They didn't freak out on each other. They went about their business, and they realize inherently there's enough to go around. And that's what people don't realize. People don't realize there's enough to go around. They see other people as a threat. They're going to come and take mine. That's a lie. Anybody who tells you that is a lie. Nobody's coming to take your job. If you're a white guy in the suburbs, you know, you should be able to pretty much do what you want. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons people have gotten left behind, you know. There's a rust belt, and it exists because of deregulation on Wall Street and Ronald Reagan letting everybody go offshore and attacking unions for decades. Unions are why you have an 8-hour workday and a 5-day work week. Unions are the reason you have health insurance. You know, those protections were given to you by democratic administrations, you know, by people who weren't looking out for the top 1%. They weren't looking out so much for the factory owners as much as they were looking out for the people who worked in the factories. You know, you used to be able to get a job in a factory in Michigan, put 3 kids through college, put 2 cars in the garage, and own a fucking house in America. You know, and you did it for decades. A lot of that was based on fossil fuels, you know, so that could change, but you're still going to have to manufacture and make things. And if you give people an honest wage and an opportunity up out of that, you lift, all boats rise with that. Right? And that was the economic model that made this country great. You know, that was a lot of what happened post-World War II. Right? And then Reagan came along, and they're like, why are we spending all this money on the workers? You know, he taxed unemployment benefits. You know, you never did that before. You know, they cut everything they could. They cut spending. They cut social services. All the spending that helps people, Social Security, all that stuff is under threat again. You know, and a moron figurehead who just wants to enrich himself is going to be the guy enacting it if you let him. You know, so you have to understand the people that are still supporting him are brainwashed. They're being fed this poison and this fear, right, that somebody else is coming to take their job. It's not true. And you don't even want those jobs, you know. So and they don't really, they want those jobs now so they can get a leg up, you know, and send their kids to school, and their kids can be doctors and lawyers and all these other things. And that's what you want. You know, I don't mean to keep beating a dead horse, but that's the reality, you know. And I see these people. I live amongst them. We all do. You know, they're militarized. They're weaponized on hate. And they're getting played by like the worst con man ever. Like Trump, none of it makes sense. The shooting, his assassination doesn't make sense. He's got a book coming out next month where the picture is on the cover. Like, I'm not buying any of that shit. Like, I know somebody died, but Trump wouldn't care about sacrificing somebody in his audience. That's why he kissed the helmet and all this crap, you know? And I guarantee you they got a bunch of other stuff up their sleeves. Mike Flynn is definitely heading this up. If you haven't read my piece on Substack, I stayed at a hotel in the spring in Florida, and there was like military dudes training there. They were leaving every day and doing something and then coming back at night. And they were there for like a week, and they were well funded. So there'll be all kinds of chaos, as I've said before, on election night. And Georgia, he's got these people on the voting board, on the elections board that are going to not certify the votes, that are going to throw out the votes. They're going to try all kinds of tricks. What is incumbent upon us to do is to show up in numbers so large that it's obvious that Harris Walz won, that there's no question that we won, because he's going to cry and he's going to have his tantrum, and the idiots are going to go along with it, and you have to make sure, no chance, pal. You tried that last time. It ain't working this time, Sorry, I can't help it. I see a keyboard, I got to touch it. That's the deal. That's what we got to do. We got to vote. We got to celebrate. You got to make the next 90 days a warm-up, for the good things that are going to come when we continue the policies of Biden, we continue to push Trump to the back of the clown car where he belongs, finally hold him accountable for his crimes, finally just stop talking about him, log off of the social media platforms run by fascists. Elon Musk is an idiot. He's never invented anything. He's a moron who takes other people's ideas. It won't end well for Elon Musk. I promise you that. That guy's not going to live a long, happy life. He's just too miserable, too stupid, too whacked out a person. My friends and brothers in the UK, stand up against that racism. That's not, who you are. I mean, I know you guys invented that shit in a way, right? Colonialism. But come on, we're moving past that, man. We don't need that. We don't need that anywhere. And it's incumbent upon us in our private lives. When you hear someone saying something racist, something homophobic, something misogynistic, call them on it. Don't just laugh it off. Call them on it. Say, why do you feel that way, man? What are you doing? That's not who we are. Don't let the next generation do that. I saw this clip of Trump sitting in his golf cart talking smack about VP Harris. She's such a fucking bitch, or whatever he said, right? He's got his kid sitting next to him, who's just sitting there, not saying a word. He doesn't talk much. But he's saying that filth in front of the next generation of Trumps. And I don't know that kid. He's too young for me to talk about him. But I know the adult kids, and they're just as bad as he is. Eric, Don Jr., Vanki. I mean, these are very odious human beings. I was Vanki's assistant, or handler rather, on The Celebrity Apprentice. And she's just an awful person. And they know their dad is an awful person. They know their dad is a sexual predator. Anybody who spent 5 minutes around Donald Trump knows that, including the businessmen that just had the fundraiser for him in Bridgehampton. Howard Lutnick and all the dudes who ponied up big money to sit there and listen to this guy talk smack, and they were all apparently disappointed because he was whacked out of his mind saying his same stupid shit. Well, what did you expect? You think he's going to be different? He doesn't have the ability to change, because to change you need humility, right? He doesn't have humility. He doesn't have self-awareness. He lives in resentment. He snorts Adderall all day. He's calling John Tester fat, and he himself wears a girdle. I've seen him in it. He wears a diaper because he's incontinent, because all he eats is fucking fast food, and he snorts Adderall all day. So his guts are just a mess, and he rages out. He's not a healthy person. If you want to be healthy, especially if you have addiction and compulsion, you have to get humble. You have to have humility. You have to say, I'm willing to change. And you have to ask somebody else to show you the way to change. Help me change. Help me be accountable to myself, because the story I'm telling myself in my head is just making me crazier. And that's what Trump has, right? He's crazy, and he's got people around him that make him crazier. And I guarantee you that's what the Elon Musk thing will be tonight, because Elon Musk is out of his freaking mind too. Right? So it's going to be two people out of their freaking minds doing a PR stunt, and the press will act like it's an interview. It's not an interview, just like it wasn't a press conference last week, because they didn't ask him any real questions. Nobody stood up and said, hey, the Washington Post just reported 5 days ago that you got $10 million from LCC in the final weeks of your campaign. Where did that money go, and why did you accept money from a foreign leader when that is against the law? As a candidate for the president of the United States. Nobody asked him that. He didn't even give the reporters microphones, so you couldn't hear their questions, right? So all the audio would just be him spewing his canned answers, which were all lies. And they participated in that and treated it as news. And I say they, I mean mainstream media. That's a manipulation. That's bullshit. You don't need any more of that crap, okay? That's entertainment. You turn on the cable news now, it's an expensive podcast. They got good cameras, and that's about it. They're still doing Zoom calls just like this, The guests don't even have microphones. They're just talking to their laptop. That's not news. That's just filling up hours with the same dreck and dribble that we've been listening to for 8 years. And I'm personally sick of it. The sun's coming out, The sun's coming out on us as a people, and we need the sunlight. We need sunlight as a disinfectant. We need to get all these people that are hiding under their rocks and change them. They're not our enemies. That's the other thing. They speak about retribution and vengeance. That's not what we want. We just want to wake people up, and say, hey, you've been lied to, man. These other people are not your enemy. Nobody's taken your job. Have you gotten screwed over? Yes, you have. But that's because of economic policies from Republicans that have been waving flags in your face and screaming eagles and telling you to buy guns and giant pickup trucks because you're meant to live in fear so they can make money off of your fear and your ignorance. And you need to step away from that. You need to step away from your racism and your homophobia. You need to understand people you love are probably gay. People in your family are probably gay. And you don't need to shut yourself off to that love. And there's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing not normal about it. What's not normal is living in an aberrant, fear-based, vindictive mindset. And history's littered with people who fell for that bullshit. And it never ends well for them. And you're getting a second chance. And you need to get on board. You need to get on board with hope and joy and compassion, because that's what true patriots do. And that's what moves this country forward. And we have a lot of problems, and there's a lot of bad actors on the world stage, and you don't vote for a guy who brags about his friendship with President Z, right? Vote for somebody who has balls to stand up to him. That ain't the Republican Party. That's a Democratic Party. Okay, enough of my rap. At least sound effects are great, aren't they? Anyway, I appreciate you guys listening. Enjoy the rest of your summer. There's about 3 weeks left. There's a month left. It doesn't end until the 21st. But we all know after Labor Day, it's back to business. And it's going to be a sprint to the finish line. And they're going to throw all kinds of chaos at us. And we can't fall for it. Keep the faith, Stay on the path. It's worth it. It's worth it. And think of it as an opportunity. We're given a rare opportunity in this generation to affect real change, to stand up there and watch it, watch it get better, hand a gift off. You just watch the Olympics. Think of it as a relay race. We're getting to the point where we're handing the baton behind us, So you got to keep running as fast as you can, cross that line and hand it back, That's what we're going to do. All right. Thanks for listening. Noel Casler Podcast, episode 115. Check out Noel's notes on Substack, noelcasler.com. Thank you for all the support, all the kind words. As always, enjoy yourselves. Thank you for listening. I love you guys. Peace.